And we're live. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are watching this edition of Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live Show. I'm Marion Spears-Carr, and I'm your host. And I'm so, as always, on Fridays, very excited to bring this show to you in this conversation. It's a very interactive show. We want you to be a part of it. So please let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you have questions. Today's topic is something that I've really been paying a lot of attention to over the last 4 or 5 years. From a business perspective, is in the changes that are taking place in the ambulatory surgery environment, that the growth of ambulatory surgery centers, the level of care that's being delivered, the level of surgeries that are being delivered in that space is growing dramatically, and there's a lot of changes taking place. And today I wanted to introduce you all to a good friend of mine now who I've met through this journey of trying to figure out what's going on in the ASC world, is actually Tavakar. He's a principal and managing director of Skyline Healthcare Solutions, LLC, and he has an incredible background in leadership in the context of the ambulatory surgery center and healthcare in general. And I'll let him introduce himself today. And we're really going to talk about really what's happening in the ASC environment and why leadership is going to make a difference. Actually, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Marion. I really appreciate you setting this up. Glad to always see you and to have insightful conversations with you.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, he's down in Houston, Texas, a state that I do a ton of work in. And for those of you who are watching this show for the first time or don't know who I am, I'm Marion Spears-Carr. I run my third new executive search firm that I launched in December called Inflow Executives. And we do advisory work and executive search and leadership team development work all across the country. But actually, when we talked about you coming on the show, we were really talking about all the different changes that are taking place in the world of ambulatory surgery and ASC, their growth, expansion, the things I mentioned to the group a while ago. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about, kind of from your perspective, kind of what you see is happening in that landscape, what the market looks like, and how leadership is going to have an impact, and what we need to understand about it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. No, certainly, right? So ASCs are growing. They're going to continue to grow. So you start looking at some of the data that's out there from some of the big firms. So for example, you look at the 2024 BMG report, it indicates that 68% of ASCs are still independent. You've got this movement with physicians who are looking for three main things. They're looking for efficiency, they're looking for autonomy, and certainly they're looking for some sort of financial gain. So there is going to be an increased interest from these docs who are wanting to do their own thing. So focusing on some of these independent physicians, or looking at these doctors that are looking at being a little bit more, having a little bit more autonomy, there certainly is opportunity out there now for increased growth with ASCs.
When you think about that, see, that's a large number. 68% are still independent. That's changing the business model in the marketplace dramatically, right? So tell me a little bit about how that is also changing how healthcare systems need to see themselves in a competitive piece. I know we're talking about leadership, but this is really kind of part and parcel. If there's that large a number of independent practices, that speaks to, I'd love for you to talk about that.
Hospitals recognize it as well. So let me give you some more data. The 2023 Avanza survey shows that 7 out of 10 hospitals are going to continue their investment or affiliation with ASC. So hospitals certainly see it. So you're going to not only see ASC growth from that independent physician group, but you're going to start seeing a lot more from hospital and big health systems. That's the way the industry is going. And so if that's going to be because of patient preference, or if that's going to be from payer pressure, it's going to be moving in that direction even more than it is now.
Yeah, I can see that. So when you think about the companies that you work with, you talked about the leadership from a context of the physician ownership and what their needs are. As we continue to move down this path of ASCs increasing the level of surgeries that are being done in that venue, that type of venue. You know, you and I talked offline about the fact that probably someday I'm going to have a knee or a hip replacement. Hopefully not, but from all the damage I've done to myself over the years, one of those is probably true. And still, to me, the idea of actually having going in at 5:30 in the morning and being home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just with a hip replacement, which seems pretty simple now in my brain, that's still like, wow, like that's a different, that to me, that's kind of interesting and different. I don't even know if I want to do that, but talk about how from the perspective of the practices, the ASCs, how the physicians need to understand that they have to invest in the leadership and in the level of their staff. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's key to this idea of delivering care in that environment.
Yeah, certainly, right? So we talk about procedure migration from hospitals to ASCs. We talk about the complexity of cases moving from the hospital to the ASC. So joint replacement, if it's hips, if it's knees, cardiovascular world right now, right? So CV procedures is going to be huge. So you've got complex procedures being moved over. You have to have staff that are skilled to be able to handle these we call it hospital type procedures. So from a nursing perspective, a surgical type perspective, but from a leadership perspective, understanding you've got to have good leaders that can provide that support. So support in ensuring quality of care, support in ensuring patient safety. And then certainly at the end of the day, you have to have those that can manage your financial performance, your regulatory compliance, operational efficiency from a leadership perspective. But I want to kind of take a step back, because there's two areas which I think are fundamental for success. The first one is physician relations and the physician experience. So making sure that you're partnering with physicians and physician leaders. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful, especially as you start doing more complex procedures. And the last thing, which is really the first thing, is patient experience, is taking care of that patient, making sure that that patient understands that you are a certified, qualified facility that provides excellent care, that you keep the patient safe, and your goal is to make sure that patient has a fantastic experience from check-in to check-out. So that becomes very critical as we start doing more of these complex things that patients may be wary about. Telling me I'm getting a hip replacement, I can show up at 6 a.m. and be at my own house by 1 p.m. That's you wouldn't have thought about that several years ago, and now that's commonplace.
Yeah, I think, and so talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's really important that from the perspective of what's that customer experience going to be? What, as you said, what's their expectations? Do they feel safe and secure that you are the highest quality of care, that you are going to protect them from post surgery issues like hospital acquired? Well, I guess you don't have a hospital acquired infection if you're not in the hospital. So,
right.
I mean, talk a little bit more about why, from a leadership context, that needs to be key focus as well.
I think it goes back to key leadership tenet about communication. So communicating those good things is communicating why there is lower infections. I think communicating where there's cost savings for the patient. You don't have to go spend all this money in a hospital. You can get that same procedure for a lower cost, safer environment, a good experience for your family as well. It's key. I think a key part of that also is setting your staff expectations. So from a leadership perspective, making sure you've got good staff management and you've got great staff engagement. That staff engagement is going to correlate directly to how that patient care is delivered. So that becomes monumental when you're trying to reassure a patient that, hey, we're going to take care of your hip today. We're going to take care of your knee today. We're going to do this procedure, and it's going to be a great experience for you. Our team's going to take fantastic care of you, and you'll be home, this afternoon.
Had a little mic problem there. I was talking and I was muted, but anyway, there I'm back. Hey, checking in. Thank you for checking in, Gabriel. Checking in from New Rochelle, New York. Glad to have you. If you're watching live, This is the Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live Show, my LinkedIn Live show that I started a while ago. I realized this week that I'm over 100 episodes. So actually, you are now 101. So you've started the next 100. You've in monthly shows that we'll be doing. So I'm glad you're on the on the front end of the next 100 of shows. Hopefully we'll do over the next year and a half or so, or 2 years. We'll see how long it takes, but glad to have you, Gabriel. If you're watching live, please let us know, or if you watch the recording, let us know where you're watching from, because we don't know what our reach is. We want to see who's involved. And if you have questions, actually, I would love for you to talk a little bit about kind of your background and how you got to this point, because you've recently started your own company and your own consulting group. We actually, interesting enough, we both are starting new companies kind of at the same time. Tell me a little, share with the audience kind of how you got to this point and how you became such a expert in this space.
Well, so this is my 24th year in healthcare. So I started off early doing patient care, level 1 ERs, back of an ambulance. Kind of parlayed that with my graduate school education and kind of flipped from scrubs to a suit. So it's been part of organizations with patient care delivery. I have had the honor of being part of a fantastic organization down here in Houston for several years, 15 years, been practice administrator, clinic administrator. So I've been in the ASC space now for the last about decade. I think I've been able to get to where I am because of the contacts that I've made. So I think back at my network of ASC individuals, vendors, professionals. And so what I've done is to your point, I've transitioned to my own thing, focusing on helping clinicians, helping organizations, if it's with their physician practice or if it's with their ASC, if it's, optimizing ASC, or if it's building a new ASC or developing ASC strategies. I think what I can do is connect the dots. So that's connecting the dots within an organization that needs a little bit of operational TLC. If it's connecting physicians or organizations with vendors or people that I have vetted because of my long-term relationship. So I think with that connection, my goal is to make everybody successful, making that physician practice successful, making that ASC successful. At the end of the day, also making sure these organizations have a positive impact on patient care.
I love just hearing your background, and the fact that when you said that you've been in since 24, my first thought, because you look so young, and fresh and everything. I look so old on the screen. I'm thinking, well, he started when he's like 5. But anyway, enough about that. Checking in, Leah is checking in from Houston, Texas. Thank you for being here. She's a former colleague of yours at Kelsey-Seybold. Frankie Farrar is checking in. Frankie is one of the best recruiting professionals I've ever worked with, and glad to have you watching the show today, Frankie. And Dan's checking in from St. Louis, Missouri. Absolutely glad to have you guys, and ladies, please let us know you're there. We just want to know. It makes me excited to know who we're reaching. So, Ashkay, one of the things that I think when we connected, I think we were connected because I was at a private equity conference around ambulatory surgery center and got referred to you. And there's a lot of private equity money still looking at the ambulatory business environment as a place to put money in. You mentioned that statistic earlier about the number of ambulatory surgery centers that are still privately held. That number was higher than I expected. Talk a little bit about that side of the business from a leadership context. Is if there's private equity money coming in, if there is business opportunities there, what's the mindset of leaders that are maybe in the hospital setting now that want to make that leap over into that world? What are some of the challenges and things that they're going to need to learn about the ASC environment when it's private equity backed or privately funded?
Yeah, so 2 things on that. So conversations that I had with physicians looking to build their own ASCs, there's a good percentage who are looking at some point to have some sort of transaction with a private equity firm after being established for some time, right? So earlier I mentioned there's 3 main areas for these physicians: autonomy, efficiency, and financial gain. So I think private equity will still play a big role. especially with some of these independent docs looking to either grow or to make a decent amount of financial gain. From a hospital perspective, from a health system perspective, I think that the private equity piece is going to be there. I think the biggest thing to look at is culture and understanding how you maintain your culture between your health system and your ASCs. Even when you've got, a VC fund, a private equity firm coming in and helping you grow your business. I think that's going to be key is maintaining that culture.
Yeah, I think that's critically important. I had a post today that was inspired by a conversation I had yesterday with a hospital leader around this idea of that if we're really trying to make an impact on the people we serve, then the people inside the company that we lead we have to have a positive impact on them first. And I like the idea of tying in, okay, it's going to be private equity back. That's where the money's going to come from. There's going to be this expectation of revenue, return on investment, all those things. But ultimately, it's going to be tied back from a success perspective, is going to really be connected around what's the culture? Are we hiring the right people, et cetera? So I love that. I love that connection. One of the things I wanted to ask you too, I talked about this, you and I talked about this before, is you talked about the level of changes in the quality of, not the quality, the type of surgeries that are coming to the ambulatory environment. How does that pose a challenge for ASCs that are already in the business? They're going to have to compete at a higher level. What are your thoughts around that? I think that's important to talk about.
So I see two areas of focus with that, right? So yes, complex procedures are coming in. So now you're going to have to find staff that may have a different skill set than your current staff. If it's hospital, nurses or techs, personnel, there's going to have to be an expectation on reviewing wages because of the type of individual with the background, with experience that you need. So you got to start looking at your staffing models, your expenses related to wages. The other big thing I look at is technology. So these complex cases have their own set of tools and toys that surgeons need, that nurses need, that surgical techs need. And a lot of that is capital intensive. So being able to look at how you're going to acquire all these widgets and all these things that frankly cost a lot of money is going to be critical for ASCs to evaluate. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you might be able to afford to get it done immediately. So one area I look at is robotic procedures, right?
Okay.
So there are some ASCs out there that have a Da Vinci moving some robotic cases. At some point in the future, is that going to be an expectation from some surgeons? Maybe. Is it affordable for every ASC? No, but your leader has to work on finding the best way for you to be able to go down that route and to be able to provide those complex cases, or to be able to provide the ability to procure those highly capital intensive items.
And that leads to my next question is one of the things that I've noticed and I recruit in the private equity side of the world, leadership for those type of organizations, is a lot of the ASCs that I see out there are very specific, targeted one or two modalities. They really, like for orthopedics, for example, all they do at that ASC is orthopedics. Of course, that's still painting with a pretty broad brush. How much of that kind of level of specialty have you seen in the ASC environments that a lot of them are just very focused on a particular type of surgery or particular service line? And do you see that trend continuing based on what you just talked about? Like, not everybody can afford a Da Vinci,
Yeah, certainly, right? I came from a large organization that was multi-specialty, certainly different environment than some of the private practice physicians I'm speaking with or I'm working with. The ones I have been in touch with are going to be more single specialty or just a few specialties. If it's orthopedics and pain, plastics, if it's just say CV, or if it's just purely pain management, right? So it's going to be very, very focused on one or a few service lines.
Yeah, and the growth in the pain management side of the business, I understand is has been pretty significant over the last few years as well. What I am curious, I'm going to switch gears a moment here because you can't have a conversation today in healthcare without talking about the pandemic. You just can't. Like it's like you know it's almost like BC and AD, right? In terms of our calendar, it's more like now it's like what we did as a business before the pandemic and what is happening after the pandemic. I'm really curious to hear about what your thoughts are around how ambulatory surgery centers not only made it through that process, but what are some things that these organizations can do now to kind of protect their business model? I know this is a little bit off track, but it is a leadership component. What can they do about their business model in case we run into another situation like that? What are some things that they might be able to do to be more sustainable? And hopefully they won't cancel a lot of surgeries and stuff. But what are your thoughts around that? It's kind of a broad question, so forgive me for that. But
a couple of comments.
Yeah,
a couple of comments, right? So yes, from a during pandemic perspective, I think ASCs did a tremendous job in showing their value, right? Hospitals full of sick people, surgeries being canceled. We did a fantastic job down here in Texas where, yes, we were shut down, but for just a brief period of time, working with the powers that be that recognized the value of surgery centers and allowed surgery to resume in ASCs. So I think that has continued with that notion of, all right, hospitals serve their purpose. Hospitals are necessary for those sick patients, those very big procedures that require multi-day stays. But here's now an opportunity for ASCs to show their value. And I think ASCs absolutely did during the pandemic. Now, coming out of the pandemic, you started seeing increases in those procedures that patients didn't get during the pandemic. So if it was screening colonoscopies or some of these other elective things, everyone started seeing a tremendous increase. So I just think that the trajectory of ASCs, it may have become a little bit stronger due to the events that we all went through.
Yeah, absolutely. Just in build up demand that was not being able to be met. Now, all of a sudden, now can be met through the ASC environment. Gabriel's made a post in a long post with a question, but I wanted that, and that's almost a topic for a different LinkedIn Live. But I do want to love for you to talk about what you understand in terms of the comparison of outcomes in the ambulatory space as opposed to how does it compare from an infection rate, and what I guess what's the positive around ambulatory surgery centers? What's the outcomes look like for patients in terms of hospital acquired infection rates or recovery rates, or I guess really why should we have our surgeries other than from a cost perspective? Why is the ambulatory surgery space a really good idea for the patient?
So I think if you look at some of the data that's out there, it indicates that your infection rates are lower in ASCs, that your outcomes are just as good in ASCs, right? So positive, your cost is lower in ASCs, cost is lower for patients, cost is lower for your payers. So, I think at the end of the day, it's what level of cases are being done, the complexity of cases, are they appropriate? Are we keeping our patients safe? Is our team providing great quality? Is the patient experience good? Is the physician experience good? And I think ASCs provide all that. So, it's a difficult conversation to have. And maybe it's just because of the way that we have been traditionally used to healthcare in the United States, right?
Yeah.
You go to a hospital for surgery. So I just think it's something that is just ingrained in our culture here. And that's just something that's going to have to change, and it'll change with time. And we're seeing it today. We're seeing it today. So
yeah, it comes with consumer understanding of the market, consumer expectations. And I think there's a generational connection too. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, I've had a lot of friends recently have hips and knees done, and they did them out. As a matter of fact, I had a friend of mine not too long ago who had double knee surgery and went home the same day. Like, pretty crazy. You know, when you come from the extreme sports world, you're probably going to get a knee replaced or a hip replaced or something. So that's kind of my circle of influence. But one of the things I do want to ask you, a lot of people that watch our show, the Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live show, are young leaders or new leaders in the healthcare space through my involvement with ACHE and mentoring programs, et cetera. For leaders that are looking, you know, aspiring leaders that are looking at different segments of the market for career opportunities, what's the ASC environment look like for them, and what are some things they should pay attention to?
No, it's a great question. I think the ASC environment is growing. Certainly, we can see it from some of the companies out there, the USPIs, the SCAs of the world. So for them to look at some of these big companies, but then also if they're part of a health system that has, you know, their own ASCs, hopefully there's some opportunity there. But from a leadership perspective, and this is something I still do to this day, and I kind of take it back to those books you read in grad school, right? So I think about Stephen Covey, right? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So if that means listening to docs, if that means putting on a pair of scrubs and going and observing, what I like to tell young leaders is you can't manage from a spreadsheet. You got to get up and see what's going on with that staff. You have to go watch workflows before you can go, you know, tell someone what process to change. So that's something I encourage young leaders to do is to get up, get out there, ask questions, and understand what is going on.
I think that's incredible advice. I think that's great advice. And I think we get so lost in at all young leaders, new leaders, old leaders, mid careers, whoever, we get so lost in the minutia of what we have to accomplish today that we fail to do exactly what you're talking about that. And we have to have companies, let's face it, we have to have companies that give them the latitude to do that. It's like, hey, you know, you want to learn, this is some of the, you're going to have to take time to do that. And I think from a leadership perspective, we need to, you know, we need to stress that and give people the opportunity to do that, to go observe. And one of the things that you were talking about, you know, you were, when you made the transition over to the consulting space, you know, I asked you the question beforehand. It's like, how's it going being on your own and not being on site? And you corrected me. You said, no, I'm on site with a particular client right now, 4 days a week. I'm actually there putting on scrub. You're mirroring, or not mirroring, you're modeling what you just talked about. How's that been for you? I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
It's been fantastic. The transition's been great. Working with a client right now, which is fantastic. What I recognize is that there are intelligent people out there. Like I said earlier, I'm here to help connect the dots. I think a lot of people already have the answers. People get busy with patient care activities and growing the business. But to be out there, like I said, understand what folks are doing. And then if I can provide any kind of insight on operational efficiency, on some tweaks to processes or implementation of different things for them to enhance their patient care, that patient care experience, that physician experience, that staff experience, it's fun.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to we're going to wrap up here in a moment, but I posted for those of you watching either live or who watch the replay. That's the great part about Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live. This show's evergreen. You can go back and watch the replay and you can share it. Please share this with your audience. And if you signed up to attend this event, please let us know your feedback. I want to know what you think about our conversations. I'm not the best interviewer in the world. I just like to talk about what we want to talk about. And so actually you were a fantastic guest, which I expected you to be. Any last parting comments you'd like to make? I have posted your LinkedIn link in the comments. If people want to connect with you, they can reach out. Is there any last comments you'd like to share with the audience?
All right, Marion, I appreciate the opportunity. This is fantastic. I love speaking with you. I could talk about all this stuff for hours with you and with others. But yeah, the ASC world is exciting. There's a lot going on, a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity. So if anyone wants to speak with me afterwards, feel free to send me a message, and I'll be more than happy to connect.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you for being a guest on my show, and we'll have you back on because there's some topics coming up around the growth of the ASC, especially as we've already hit on about this advancement of the type of surgeries. I mean, they're going to be done a cardiology, invasive cardiology stuff, all kinds of different things. And there's money pouring into that space. So thank you for being on the show. For those of you who are watching, this is the Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live show. I'm Marion Spears-Carr. I'm the managing partner and founder of a new search and solutions and consulting firm called Inflow Executives. Glad to have you with us on this Friday. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again. Have a great day.